good evening, everyone. My office is called Views Design because what we do, we're providing outlooks and insights for our clients. There's an office in Switzerland run by my friend, Lutz Gebhardt, and I, as Wesley explained, I work in Paris and in Cornwall del Mar, and so I'm either here or there. So we are a two-man, three-office or three-location office, which is, kind of very boutique-y. I'm working on product design, which is what I studied, packaging, interface, and corporate design. Some examples here, there is a blood transport unit for a French company on the left, in the middle, a remote control for model airplanes. We're talking very sophisticated model airplanes. That remote is costing $1,000, so it's quite a sophisticated piece of equipment. And on the right, a coffee machine for a Swiss client that sells it through other brands. For instance, in the United States, it was sold under Krebs. Okay, sorry, I don't know why. Here on the left, I work for a German company that produces watches and clocks. In the middle, Jura coffee machine, a Swiss client. And on the right, work for a startup in men's luxury grooming, a razor and brush stand, where razor and brush are magnetically suspended, which is patentable. I also do packaging design, gift bags for the Korean largest watch company, Romanson. Again, the startup for men's luxury grooming, Homage, I did packaging for. That's a dispenser that you can twist and lock, and it got a design award in New York. And on the right, a reusable gift box. That's a very expensive product in there. I think the price is $5,000. It was platinum coated. And so the gift box could be expensive, and we decided to make it so it can be reused as a humidor for cigars or to store your jewelry. And it was the choice of the customer what kind of box he wanted. I'm doing a lot of interface design or UX, user experience, whatever you want to call it. I find it fascinating. There's the time aspect in addition to the two or sometimes even three or virtual three-dimensionality that appears in it. So on the left, work for a very giant corporation that has the headquarters in Liechtenstein, which is a valley in the east of Switzerland. But they also have, factories in Sweden and in Singapore and in Syracuse, New York, and Cologne. And we designed a general guide for all their interfaces. So in the company, there's one person traveling around purchasing new companies, and whenever they join the mothership, then the interface gets adjusted to what we've decided to do. The colors, the icons, everything. In the middle, that's a company in Irvine for medical devices. It's an interface for pupillometer. It's actually a very interesting little machine. It's like a pistol-shaped thing used in ERs. You point it at the eye of somebody who has been injured, and then a light flash occurs, and then they measure the time of the reaction and can tell whether the person is brain dead or not. And it can be stored over time. It's very sophisticated. And on the right, the remote control that I showed you before, the interface is quite complex because flying a model airplane underlies the same aerodynamical laws that a real plane is exposed to. And so to fly it is actually similarly complicated. This is how I then communicate the interface design specification. So it's a very tedious, detailed thing about fonts, font sizes, colors, transitions, a mouse rollover, color change, etc., etc. So that it's like a law book you're writing. And that's just one page out of a law book for one company. And then I created this icon collection, or as I like to call it, an alphabet, with the specificity being that each letter or each icon is not only like a vowel, like in real letters, but it can be an operation, it can show a status, it can be a command, and to make that in a way that it is legible even at a distance, or when it's very small. Usually it's 10 by 10 millimeter size that it's displayed on, and that's a challenge. And I like that because it forces you to minimize your visual expression, to reduce it to the absolute minimum, to the important part, and leave everything away that's not vitally important. When you put all this together, graphic, packaging, product, interface, you talk about corporate design, and that is a nice challenge for a designer when he gets the opportunity to design not only one product, but the whole company's appearance, like I did for the Korean watch company or for the startup in the middle and on the right. So I designed products, packaging, graphic, logo, even found a name in the case of Homage and Divador. And that makes me proud, but also it's very fulfilling, very satisfying to be able to do that. Tonight, I want to talk about fighting memory. Why do I want to talk about fighting memory? Because I think that what sets us apart from engineers is that engineers and designers both work on making products better and how to handle them better, how to produce them more efficiently, cheaper, with a better quality result. But the one thing that sets us apart as designers, we are in charge of giving the shape to a product. We have this artistic component that engineers don't have. And that's an honorable work. That's, again, a very satisfying work, but is also fraught with a problem that the consumers that we design for have a memory and they have an expectation. And when you design, for instance, a coffee machine, and you put that in a test with 4 existing coffee machines, you will at maximum get 40% acceptance, because the consumers will say, well, my neighbor has it, or my aunt has it, or I used to have that kind of machine. They will know these existing machines, but they've never seen your design, and there's always a preference for the known. So they all go back to the visual memory, and if what you show does not correspond, they'll be alienated, and that is a threshold that we have to overcome, because we as designers, we want to do new design, because only new design represents new functionality, and that's the only reason to do design, is to do something new, something that is improved. So to fight memory, we have to know a little bit what it is. And I asked myself these questions, and I researched, and of course, memory is the faculty by which the mind stores and remembers information, much like a computer, you could say. And it works fairly similar. You have to encode the information, then it's stored, and then it's retrieved. And that doesn't always work well with me. I'm a rather forgetful person. I always say I have a good memory, but she's not always there, and talking about my female partner. So memory can be a tricky thing. Is the human memory limited? That, of course, because of my challenges, my memory challenges, I ask myself that. And the surprising answer is, no, it's not limited. Aside diseases like Alzheimer, where we forget things, there is not a point in our life where our brain refuses to accept new information. On the other hand side, we have the situation that 50% of what we had a sensorial experience in the last 5 minutes will be forgotten. And I think that may be even a higher number with me. You just look at things and you forget. And I know people that say being able to forget is even a blessing. I heard somebody make a quote about the wonderful thing about reading is that you can forget. You can read something, you can forget, and you can read it anew and be excited anew to read the same book, but this time, you know, maybe seeing it from another perspective because you've forgotten a good part of it. So there are different types of memories that exist, and that's the working memory. It's like the RAM on a computer, the random access memory. There's a sensory memory like muscle memory, and then there's short-term and long-term. Tonight, I want to focus on the long-term because that's really the relevant one. And it's even a specific part, it's the visual memory. And visual memory is the memory, the recollection, short-term or long-term, of images or scenarios. Those images are stored in the primary visual cortex in the back of our head. And sometimes you have heard people say, oh, it's somewhere in the back of my head. And yeah, that's where the visual memory is. And you probably know that 70% of what we perceive every day is a visual perception. So even people that are not designers, they perceive most of what they get in as sensory input through their eyes. and the brain's interpretation of what the eyes see, because those are different things. And I'm in a Facebook group or so of hidden images, and there's fascinating optical illusions that show how your eye sees something and your brain interprets it in a different way. I recommend to check that out for designers. The best way to explain how fighting memory is possible or where it is necessary is when I talk briefly about the design process that you're all familiar with, but I think it can't hurt to repeat it. What makes the design process specific is it's like a double-edged sword, you know, there's creation and there's selection. And so the process's specificity is that it consists of these two very different parts. Creation is a synthetic activity and selection is an analytic activity. We create, and for that we have to be, you know, freewheeling, we have to be in a good mood, we have to be relaxed. And then we're selecting what we have created or what somebody else has created. If we are the boss and we're dealing with a bunch of young designers throwing out ideas, we have to tell them where to continue. And I always say, if you want to be rich and famous as a designer, being selective is more important, because you can hire these creative youngsters for hopefully not too little money, because I want you to earn well from start. But then you tell them where to continue, and that is going to define your success as a design office, that you know what is good, that you have a framework of judgment that allows you to do that. Of course, the total design process consists of more parts. I just want to mention them. There's a research. You have to first find out what's on the market, what are the conditions around the product, how is it used, how is it handled, how is it recycled, how is it transported, how is it packaged? And then an equally important part, that you analyze the collection of information that you've just made, so you have a meaningful output for your creation. Very important also is the last part. It's time-wise the smallest part of any design process that I know, but it's important that you know how to present well. You are selling your product the moment when you present. You're explaining things that may not be visible, and you draw the audience's attention to what you want them to focus on. Now, tonight we're talking only about the creation part. And that consists, again, of two parts. We designers, we create functional aspect and aesthetic aspects of a product. Functional aspects include handling, the production, recycling, packaging, and the actual performance, what the product does. And admittedly, also there, the preconceived ideas or the memories of the user plays a role when it's about how to handle a product he's never handled before. Or if you want to change and improve the handling, you as a designer think, oh, I improved it. But the poor consumer is confronted with something that he's never done, he doesn't know how. And we should all know that instruction manuals aren't read. I read instruction manuals in our household for professional reasons. For private reasons, nobody touches it. I mean, my partner, she never looks at the instruction manual. She assumes that this all has to be self-explanatory, or she can ask her designer boyfriend. But the truth is that instruction manuals are tedious, they're expensive. The clock that you saw before that I designed, the housing, the cost of the housing was less than the cost of the instruction manual for it, because, you know, it's a European company to be translated in 11 languages or what. So that's handling. Now, the aesthetic is what I want to talk about tonight. And here I try to split it up into three parts. The appeal, the intelligibility, that means how it's understood or perceived, and the reference. And let me explain that in detail, because this is what could or what should influence the shape aesthetically. Now, it looks complicated. I hope it's not too much. I'm going to show afterwards example for each of this category. So when you look at the appeal, the first thing is, of course, is it desirable, you know? And in some German design schools, they are focusing very much on, you know, material authenticity and ergonomics, and all these are important things. But some designers don't, or some design teachers don't dare to talk about the sex appeal that a product has to have. And your clients, they want that. They want to sell. To be functional with the production, they need to be able to sell that. If you make products that don't sell, you won't be a designer for long. That's just the truth. There is, of course, today with the environmental concerns, a sub-problem behind that. How should we make products that just clog up our environment desirable? No, we shouldn't. And it all gets very complicated, but it still remains a manageable thing to do things that are environmental friendly and helpful products for a consumer that are precious and valued, so they are treated better, will last longer. Desirability is important also under an ecological aspect, is what I'm saying. It can also be described as a consumer appeal. Then there's the affordability and its visual representation. Does a product look expensive? Does it look cheap? Does it communicate its value? And then there's its sheer ability, what to do and how to perform. You know, is it strong? Is it powerful? Is it high tech, etc., etc. Design is a tool of communication. And this is where intelligibility comes into play. We want a product to be self-explanatory. It should be intuitively understood. That's really a task we have, and the best designs that we see are the ones that, you know, are self-explaining. You know how to use it. You know where the top and the bottom is. I mean, there are products you really don't know which way to hold them. That's just horrible. Then you want them to be reliable, and they should look reliable too, because the durability is a point that you want to have as a product, but you also want to be visible. And then today, it has to be eco-friendly. It has to be recyclable or recycled, or in the best case, both. And so you show material purity, you show that it's easy to separate. That's a challenging task, but you know, no reason not to line up here. And then there's the reference, and that's the most stringent connection to my lecture's title. You know, there's always a history. Stuff has been there before, no matter what you do. You can't ignore that. As a designer, you have to know what has been there before. And that refers to history and to the market situation. So often I go into a shop and do what I call a store check. I just look around and see what's on the market today, particularly in areas that I'm active in, household appliances, luxury goods, but also in other areas. I mean, I'm not a product designer. I'm sorry, I'm not a car designer. I will never be, but I'm always looking with interest at car design. There are things that you can learn from car designers, and there are things you can learn how not to do. So car designers coined the term vertical continuity, which means that over the years, the cars look the same or similar. They resemble previous models to make it easier for consumers to recognize what brand you're dealing with, etc. And then there's the horizontal continuity, that different models of a brand look the same. Then you are asked to do dissimilar things. There is a market, and your client wants the product that you design for him to be unique. So you have to look different than the others, but not so different that people don't know anymore what they're dealing with. You know, I'm showing you examples of that too. I've written a book about iconic design. Iconography is for me an important aspect. It means that a product looks typical for its genre. You know, there are products that what we want ideally is what companies like Kleenex or Xerox have, that the term has become the product. You don't say, can you photocopy that? Can you Xerox that? Or do you have a Kleenex? You don't say, do you have a paper tissue? And ideally, in product design language, visual language, we do the same. We design a product that when people think of a product, they think of the product that you designed. I mean, my dream is that when people think of fully automatic espresso machines, they think of a Jura, just to give you an example. It's a matter of abstraction. So when I talk about we're giving the shape, we're giving more than the shape as designers. And here's a lineup of the approach I take when I take on a design project. The first is the size, and that usually is given by the client just by the interior components or by manufacturing costs that they say, okay, Wolfgang, can you design for us XYZ? And it's going to be about those dimensions, I guess, you know. And then comes the proportion where I have more of a say, and then the actual shape. And when I say shape, it's the overall sculptural shape. But that consists, the product consists of more. It consists of details, of openings, of handles, of feet, of connectors, of buttons, of perforations. Those I call details. And when I've designed all that, it looks already pretty much like the product. And then I still have to deal with surface texture. You know, is it glossy? Is it matte? How matte is it? Does it have a geometric texture? Does it have a smooth, even texture? And then I decide about colors. And in the end about graphics. And the easiest to change is graphics. It just slaps some other graphics on some other label. And color, usually you change the injection plastic material. So when I say we decide the shape, I'm speaking about this whole slew of elements that we are deciding. So let's talk about and show examples about this, the appeals. Here, there's a range of mobile phones, and it's about desirability, and they're designed to be attractive for specific target groups. So if you're Chinese, and you know the Chinese calendar, when the Virtu Year of the Dragon phone came out, was the Year of the Dragon, evidently, or if you just like fairy tale, mythical creatures, then that phone is for you. The rug gear is for outdoorsy types, or for people that want to appear outdoorsy. You know, it doesn't mean that you actually have to go outdoors, but you look like the adventurous type when you are carrying this phone. Then there's my first smartphone, appealing to kids. Not sure whether I want a kid to have a smartphone, but I know the problem is not whether I want it. It's either the kid uses my smartphone or it has its own. That's I think what the problematic here is. And then there's a Motorola Razor Blush Gold, which is not my sexist opinion, but it's surely the marketing department of Motorola wanted to do one that is particularly appealing to women, and that's why they did that. I just assume that, although there's again no reason why men shouldn't have a blush gold phone. This is an example from history. At a time in the 1970s when Braun was known for stainless steel, aluminum, matte black plastic, and a good portion of the product range, and the entire product range of men's shaving equipment was black. At the time, even the company Braun, that represented by Dieter Rams, the chief designer, who was very much into gray color, they had this bright orange hair dryer because they wanted to be desirable in a specific target group, and hair dryers were mostly sold to women. I, at the time, had a colorful hair dryer in bright yellow from Braun, I remember. So it doesn't mean that men can't buy that, but it shows that even if your company image is very Bauhausian, you're into this restrained color palette, you may decide to do something really wild for a specific group without compromising your brand image. When it's about affordability and its visual representation, then you see here on the left a coffee machine I designed with my partner for Jura. So that's a $3,000 coffee machine, and it should look the part. It has this polished chrome-plated front, and it really represents that that value quite well. I think it looks expensive, and it is. You know, that same company has coffee machines starting from about $800, and they are black plastic, very nice with nice chrome details. But the fully expensive-looking machine is this here. And up, they sell machines for professionals at much higher prices. And on the right, you see that soap wall holder. That is cheap, but also looks cheap, but not in a bad way. I think it looks very minimalist. I mean, it looks like I can afford that. It's a nice little thing. It makes the water from the soap drip down onto my sink. For people that don't like liquid soap, Here in 2006, that was the most expensive mobile phone in the world, the Goldfish, selling at $300,000. Have you ever heard about the company? Perhaps not. There may be a reason. So maybe there were not enough people spending $300,000 on that phone. Anyway, the quality of the calls you get on that phone probably does not differ from the one on the right. The Punkt has nothing to do with punk, by the way. It's the German word for dot or point. And this is a very affordable phone. It's like a minimalist, it's not even a particularly smart smartphone. They wanted to do something that really goes away from the expensive phones that are complex for people like my generation, boomers, that don't want to be confronted with electronics. I'm not talking about myself, but I know people my age that absolutely shy away from anything that gets complicated. And for them, a smartphone is a complicated thing. And here are two examples of developing countries. Olafur Eliasson designed a little sun solar lamp that sells at $30. And it's basically a lamp that charges during daylight and at nighttime shines, and therefore makes the lives of people in rural areas, in, for instance, Africa, a lot more manageable, because it allows them to continue to educate them because they can read with light in areas that don't have electric supply, no electricity lines. It allows them to work and earn money, which otherwise they couldn't. If it reduces their hazards for them, being poisoned by the gas of an oven, or being killed in a fire by a petroleum lamp being knocked over. So it really is a contribution to improvement of lives of many people there. And Bambudia is a Cambodian design study done by two people for low-cost prosthesis, because unfortunately, because of wartime mines, etc., there's a lot of people that have lost their limbs. And to make a product that is affordable, that looks well designed, in my understanding, and yet you can tell that it uses affordable materials. It uses wood. It's not all metal and not too complicated plastic. So it tries to be within the reach of the people that need that product, and it looks the part. If we talk about ability, I want to explain that here with a Sony headphone amplifier. You have to imagine I just assume that the quality of sound that this thing produces is just fantastic. Now, how do you show that as a designer? Because it's an acoustic quality. It's not visible. It's not visible at all. How do you show that without being too literal? Because you don't want to have any sound waves on there and say, yeah, this is more better. No, you do that by, for instance, finely honing that brass thing surrounding the electric outlet on the top that you see. Because you know that the consumers that look at that will assume that the same care that you as a designer gave to the creation of the shape and the manufacturing gave to creating this precision has been given to improving the sound. That's an unconscious or subconscious deduction that the consumer makes when he looks at that. That's how you're using the consumer's brain to your advantage. You don't say, well, what do headline amplifiers used to look like? First of all, I'm not sure they existed before. It's not even the issue. You're just saying, how do I create something that inspires certain thoughts or certain convictions within the observer that this is a good quality product, that it's high tech. And on the right, you see a wonderful study from 1959, a robot vacuum cleaner. If you look at that woman, I looked exactly like she looks at that. I looked at my robot cleaner that I got during COVID confinement, when I was holed up in my apartment in Paris and couldn't go and visit my girlfriend in the United States for 14 months. And I bought this robot vacuum cleaner because I needed a friend. And I looked exactly like she does. And when you look at the product, it suggests dynamic mobility. So when you look at the visual language, it's not like today. They look more smaller. They look more efficient, I would say, efficient use of space. But here they try to take imagery from obviously car design, which I find interesting. So the dynamic and the mobility was and the auto mobility operating on its own played a role in there. I really love this product. Let me tell you a little bit about that. That's a pen. That's a fountain pen that was designed in the 1980s, and it was designed for kids. The company or the design team, they said, we want to find out how can we make an attractive fountain pen for kids that they use in school, because in German schools, when I was a kid, it was only from the second grade on that you were allowed to use a fountain pen. It is something that, yes, at that time you want to have it, and then it becomes just a tool, but it's one of the most important tools. And in Germany, just had two brands, none of them was Lamy, and Lamy was pushing into that market. And they said, we want to find something that is equally attractive for boys or girls. This is 1980s. It was not like, oh yeah, they're all like the same. Boys like cars, girls like dolls. It was really like that. And they said, let's find out what's interesting for both. And it was adventure, animals. And that's why they came up with a safari pen. And why I use it here, because I think it does an excellent job making the product look, and the tagline was like, for the saddle bag. It was something that you take on your horse and you clip it on the saddlebag. None of these school kids has a horse or a saddlebag that it needs to ride to school with. They're not living in the wild west of the United States. But with the clip that has this steel wire that's just a little bit thicker than necessary to underline its ruggedness, and with this ingenious treatment of the ink window, that the ink window is a bit recessed, it's protected because there's so much going on a safari. And then the angle at which the plastic is cut around the ink window that exaggerates the wall thickness and make the pen therefore look more sturdy than it actually is. I think there's a model example of a good product design that tells a story. Maybe you've heard of the Sony Walkman, which was in the olden days when people still had audio cassettes and they were being able for the first time to listen to music while on the go. And then they realized, well, maybe I'm running, so I'm sweating, or on a bike in the mud, some water splashing. So they created the Sony Walkman Sport, which was waterproof-ish. And it has an imagery similar to the very industrial product on the left, which is a laser pointer, which is, I really don't know exactly what that product does. I just picked it for the imagery. It looks super rugged, and there's even a big button that you press in case of fire, and God knows what happens then. I don't know. Maybe it's firing the laser beam then. I really have no idea. But here the imagery is used to tell people, okay, we're rugged, and particularly interesting, the yellow color on the Walkman Sport, because that was used, for submarine, for high alert situations. So it's when really a lot of dynamics go on. It made you look more important. It's not a little accessory. No, this is, hey, I'm doing sport with my Sport Walkman. It's a little bit like the Apple Ultra watch today. Now about the aspect of intelligibility and what I told you about intuitivity of understanding. On the left, that's an operating panel for a wall-mounted toilet. So this thing is about a foot wide, to give you an idea of proportion. And nobody needs to be explained which button commands a small amount of water and a big one, because they just show it with the shapes. It's so banal. I mean, when you look at it now, you say, yeah, duh, of course, what's the big thing? Well, somebody had to have the idea to do it like that. And that's a design thinker that did that. That's I think it's a very good example. On the right, and please forgive me not having better, more crisper photography, there is one of the best remote controls I know. Interestingly enough, it was working with ultrasound in 1976. It operates a Bang & Olufsen hi-fi equipment that you will see later. What I liked about it, and still do, is that it really thought that there are people that love music, that love high quality music, they love opera or heavy metal or whatever, and they don't want to be bothered with technology. So they made this as simple as possible, not any simpler. So the top keys. Those are like rocking keys. They control volume down and volume up. Then there are 4 preset stations. There's not more, because are you really sure you want more? You can still tune around, but they just assume 4 stations are enough. And then there's 1 for the record player, phono key, and you switch it off on 0. So they said, we have 8 buttons. We make them look like they're only 4. That's a smart design move too, because, you know, there are 8 actual buttons underneath, but it looks even more simple. It looks like anybody can use that. You want good music, here's your thing. I think that's brilliant. And in modern times, you have these things that, depending on who you show that to, will be evaluated as being intuitively understandable or not. Because we're talking about different generations. People my age, they're called, digital immigrants. We grew up without, smartphones, without swipeable tablet computers. And for some of us, it's very difficult to make that transition from understanding that, no, the thing will not explode if you do a wrong function. You can always somehow go back. You have to figure out how. It's not complicated. But I see people that look at this product and they don't dare to touch it because they're so afraid. Younger people, they say, oh, of course I know how it works. I mean, kids today, they grow up, they have a tablet at the age of 1 or 2 or 3 that they play around with. If it's not their own, it's the parents. And they're looking at, they're doing puzzles or they're doing little games on there, and they're not scared by it, I've seen it with my godson, who was able to retrieve Russian animation cartoons the next day that he had watched previously. I have no idea how he ever learned that. The design of that Nest thermostat is brilliant. You can tell that already the shape, as simple as it is, it suggests that you can turn it. And what would you be able to operate when you turn a thermostat? Of course, the temperature. And with a Bang & Olufsen, of course, the volume. It goes without saying. It's intuitive, it's logical. And as simple as the display of the Nest is, it still shows everything you need to know, including the little green eco mode icon. It's cooling right now. That's the temperature it has right now, 78. It's super clear. I think that's a good example for intuitively understandable design. How do you show reliability? You have to remember that reliability is something that a product can only prove over decades, or at least over years. So how do you show a process that takes that time span at a moment that consumer looks at that? You have this one, maybe 20 seconds, the consumer looks at the product and he has to understand that will last long. We can't prove it to you today, but we give you visual clues. What kind of visual clues would that be? And my theory is that it is, again, precision of the detail. You show this attention to detail that is promising. It suggests that we put so much effort into making this product. We really thought about every detail, every separation of materials, every texture. And you can count on us that we put the same energy into making a product that will last for a long time if you treat it right. That is what I would say. There's other ways how to do that. Here, the Kohler shower faucet, that certainly would look good on any Swiss bank vault as the opening mechanism. It's so sturdy. So that visual sturdiness also says, hey, you can't destroy me. I mean, if you follow me in the shower, it'll still work. It'll be okay. This is rugged, On the right, the headphone, similar to the previous image. Look at the perforation on the cushion there. It's so precise. Every detail is done with so much precision. The selection of glossy and matte, again, it suggests that we've taken great care to make this product. This is not just any old headphone. To show recyclability or recycledness can be tricky, particularly recyclability. I mean, the quiver you see around this horn-shaped drinking cup is it acts as a stand when you turn it around. to me, it's made of man-made leather, so plastic, in other words, that it suggests that it's easy to take apart afterwards. That's just my gut feel. It's not that this is necessarily the case. It just suggests with the form language, with the treatment of the radius and the split lines, to me, it looks like something, oh, I can easily take that apart and recycle different materials. The veil stool on the right, I think, is quite brilliant. It uses recycled masks. That's certainly a sign of our times, as a material for upholstery. And what's so smart about it, he keeps the color, you know, so it resembles the mask colors. And I think that is nice. I'm not sure I'd like to sit on that or like to purchase it. But in terms of communicating that this is a recycled product, I think it's fantastic. Very well, good job. On the left, the Husky cup is a recycled coffee cup made from coffee husks, which apparently are just thrown away right now. And to make a product for coffee consumers out of it, I think is a good move. And, you know, designers always have choices. Maybe the material looks like that, but you could cover it with a glossy paint or whatever. And the designers decided not to do that. So it suggests that it's made of recycled material. And I think that that's the way how it should have been done. Exactly that, like they did it. The same for the recycled paper toothbrush. I think that's just a design study, by the way. That's not an actual product. But I still, it serves to illustrate how something that looks like made of recycled material can underline the message, hey, you're dealing with something that's environmental friendly. Your consciousness for the day is, your conscience is saved for the day. And now about the reference. So I spoke about vertical design continuity, although these cars, for very earthly reasons, are aligned here horizontally. It's a vertical continuity. It's the first BMW series model on the left and the last one at the time of this picture on the right. And you see, although there are some big steps in between the different models, there are some elements that connect them because the designers wanted to respect the visual memory of the consumer. And the double headlights are one visible key. The other one is what they call a kidney-shaped radiator, which dates back a lot before. One of the first BMWs had an arrow-shaped kidney, how do you say, an angled kidney-shaped radiator. And they just kept that. They're sticking to it. And at the moment, they're making it bigger and bigger. Once it'll be bigger than the car. Mercedes-Benz has done it in their SL, which is a sports car series, by using the Mercedes star and not putting it meekly up on top of the radiator, but putting it in the middle of the radiator, really showing it big. They are very proud of that car from start to today. So that's one of the things that links them. Just to show again the thinking or vertical continuity, vertical continuity of historic models resembling each other to a certain extent. Of course, the size and the proportion of the 1957 and the 2011 model for aerodynamic, for reasons of accident prevention, they are drastically different cars, there's no doubt. But there are elements that are connected, and it's done deliberately. To what extent historic references can have an impact on what we do today can be very nicely illustrated with this, one of the first automobiles, an Oldsmobile curved dashboard, made entirely out of wood, the bodywork, understood. The bottom, you see there's, of course, metal employed, for the simple reason that it was made by coach builders, and those coach builders made coaches from wood. And 30 years later, when there was more metal employed, you know, the bonnet of the car, housing of the motor, etc., the sideboards, all this is metal, but the box and the cabin for the driver is still made out of wood. And it's not only nostalgic, but at that point, still production reasons, I think, why they did employ wood, because probably it was a small series of cars. It wasn't worth making tools to have those side panels mass produced. The roof could be that there is not even a structure underneath, and it's just the flexible material. I don't know that, to be frank. And if you follow that type of car, the Woody, over the decades, you see here it's more of an application. You could have gotten away doing all this in metal, but they decided to make some real solid wood parts, and they call it estate wagon, suggesting that if you have an estate, you better have this kind of car. And this got more and more reduced. Here, there are these wannabe rivets tucking this plastic shield to the sides of the car. I find it has an amusing aspect, but you know, people wanted that, or at least the marketing departments of the car companies thought that people want that, and it continues. Here, it's just an adhesive foil with a photographic representation of wood. There's no more wood involved in the building of this car, but they still suggest, oh yeah, country, woody, right, estate. And the amazing thing is that in 2017, you can get a Tesla that has wood in its interior as an option. I mean, we've gotten so used to that we forget to ask where it comes from, because I don't think you can get a marble application there. You can get leather, of course, but it's not that any material is available, but wood is available, trust me, because originally cars were made by coach builders. And that in 2017, that still plays a role, shows you the importance of historic reference in design. Here, a lineup of shaving devices from the company Braun from 1955 to 1970, only not very long. It shows, I don't like the 1967 model because that was an exception. In 1960, Hans Gügelow decided that rather than how they previously did it, having these shavers in an ivory color, and the reason was to resemble a clean soap bar, he said, no, I want something more masculine. And that's when Braun made the shavers in black, and still does so today, perhaps a bit more metal today. But there's still a lot of black employed, you know. So you see that there was a transition between the white to the black, but then the shape jump from 1957 to 1960 is not that dramatic, you know. When you look at the IMAX, there's obviously a big jump in shapes between using, until the year 2000, a Braun tube and then an LED screen. But you see from 2002 to 2021, there's, at least on the side view and on the front view, even less so, very little change happening. And when I looked at that, you see from 2004 on that I have this characteristic stand that has a certain angle to it. And it just connects the middle of the display in the back with the furthest point of the actual stand surface that's on the table. But in 2021, they changed the production from a bent material to an extruded material. So they could have done any shape. And you see that the access point to the screen is different, but they kept the angle. And I think one of the reasons may be that they wanted some vertical continuity, some resemblance between the 2012 and the 2021 model. That's my theory. I don't know it, but when I look at it, that's my best explanation. When you talk about historic reference in mobile phones, it gets very difficult, but because, I mean, look at Apple. Basically, they haven't changed the design. Yes, of course, I know they have changed the corner radii, but if you look at, it's a black brick with rounded corners, and the radius on the corners hasn't really changed, has it? I don't criticize it. I just say it's a difficult product to prove historic reference or the opposite. And it's even worse when you look at the competition, because they all look like that. I mean, the Google phone, the whatever brand you take, Samsung, LG, they all look like that. So when you as a designer, as a young designer now get hired by Apple and you're supposed to do something, it will be tricky, and you will manage to come up with something fantastic, I'm sure. A special sub-phenomenon in historical reference is skeuomorphic design. For those of you who haven't heard, It's just basically an early interface design, so things appearing on a screen. The designers of those interfaces try to use references that people knew from mechanical design. So a button, the left on button, it looks like it's really illuminated by a little lamp, and it's really a mechanical button that moves and is on a surface and slightly raised and has a chrome ring. It mimics something that it isn't. It's just a flat piece of glass with an LED display underneath. And today, now that all the boomers have gotten used to it, I say, they do what they call flat design. They say, we just need to have a color separation. And then people will understand this is a button. And I put my finger on the glass at that area, in that area, and something will happen. And people before, at least the designers, didn't trust people to understand that. And I think a lot of people wouldn't have understood it, you know. And there are probably some that still don't understand it today. Here's a transition from the first Macintosh computer's calculator app over the skeuomorphic design in the middle to the new flat design on the right. You see the one in the middle the buttons have highlights, they have shadows. I mean, you really think you can touch that, and they're curved. I can tell that they're curved. I don't know why they're curved. They're curved, so they look like real mechanical buttons. And the flat design on the right, when you're honest, it's probably even easier to operate because it's less clutter, it's more clear. And yet they maintain the same color scheme to have something that resembles the previous model. These are, this is the Notes app. Just to give you an idea, again, on the left, you see how the paper has been torn off. The paper is yellow. It looks like somebody took a felt tip pen and wrote in there. And on the right, you see today's Notes app interface. We don't need all that. We can just write in there. We know that the phone performs the function of a note-taking device. Just for you to understand, this was done to help people transition between a physical notepad to this notepad app on the first iPhone. And today, it's just an app. Sometimes the car industry doesn't do what BMW or Mercedes have been done, continuously making incremental steps forward with a certain vertical continuity. But in the case of the Volkswagen Beetle, they sold this product millions of times, and they came up with a new Volkswagen Golf. It was called Rabbit initially, I think, in the States at least. And then many years later say, well, wait a minute, we sold so many of those Beetles and people loved it. It was a more emotional product than the Volkswagen Golf. Let's make a re-edition of that. Let's launch that again. And they created the new Beetle. And although, again, proportion and size are significantly different, you see that the overall imagery is quite similar. And that's, of course, intentional. And you can debate whether that is a good thing or a bad thing. And I have a friend who really hates that. He thinks it doesn't have the elegance and the refinement of the proportion. It looks more like a toy, and he sees that critically. I tend to look more favorably at this, but I know it's not like as designers you have to hate it or you have to love it. You're allowed to have your own opinion. Mini was more successful, much more successful with their re-edition. It may have to do that the Volkswagen original Beetle was a very reliable car, and the original Mini was not. And the new one is fairly reliable. It's actually pretty good. There's an example of a chair design, and I think it's a very good, it's a picture book example how you can have a historic reference without looking stupid. So Philip Stark looked at the Louis XVI chair and basically kept the shape with, of course, detail changes. He simplified it, less ornament, no pads, no cushions here. And he used material, flexible, transparent plastic, well, slightly flexible, transparent plastic. It's not brittle at all. I mean, this exists at the children's stool, and I gave it to all my grandkids and friends' kids. Because a kid can take that and slam it on the floor and nothing happens. You can hardly hurt yourself with it. You can't break the chair. You can't break the furniture with it. It's a real fantastic product, even as a kid's chair. And it's comfortable. The original Louis XVI is not particularly comfortable. The ergonomics are wrong. It's too low. The angles are just not right. I wouldn't like to spend an evening on that. The one on the right, full disclosure, is in my dining room in Paris, and you can sit on that for 3 hours. And although it's just plastic, it's still comfortable. And that is amazing. So he has new material, new production technique, injection molding this in one entire piece only without any connection. So this is one piece. Required an expensive tooling, okay, but that investment has paid off beautifully. That sells like hotcakes, that chair. And he keeps the historic reference in the shape. So not stupidly just copying what has been done before, but a new interpretation. That, I think, is how you should do it. Just to tell you that's not the only way how to do it, I put in a 1930 chair from Marcel Breuer, the cantilever chair. You have to imagine, before that chair, before Bauhaus, all furniture was done in wood. Nobody used what they considered plumbing material, metal tubes, to make a piece of furniture that should go in my living room, where everything else is carpet, textile, upholstery, wood, carved probably. That doesn't fit, does it? And those Bauhaus people, they said, okay, it doesn't fit, so we change your other furniture too. So they were absolutely revolutionary in their approach to furniture. And yet when you look, then you see that this rattan weaving of the seat surface and the backrest, that is a carryover from other Tonet chairs, because that was produced by Tonet, the Austrian-German company. That is the same material they used. So it didn't alienate too much. If they would have made the whole, I mean, there are other versions of this chair with, actually there are some that have a metal weaving, very, very advanced at the time. And those were not so successful, but this chair still sells today. It's just a magnificent, simple chair. And it shows you that you don't have to take over the imagery of a Louis XVI chair. You can make the chair that Marcel Breuer did, you can make the chair that Philippe Starck did. And you both take over some historical aspects, and both are innovative modern chairs for their time. This is not an actual product. This is a design study, and I love it because it's crazy. I would not like to work with it. And as I said, it's not on the market, but somebody took the architecture of Antonio Gaudi, a Spanish architect who worked a lot in Barcelona. If you ever go there, you can't miss it. It's beautiful. It's really crazy. He has these organic shapes influenced by Art Nouveau. And somebody said, oh, I want this kind of imagery on a product. That's just for you as a thought. I don't say do that. I don't think that could sell, but it's just a way how to use historic references in design. Then we have the aspect of similarity. Many times when you get a project commissioned by a client, the client wants you to look at the other products he has on the market and wants it to resemble those in a certain way. And here you see Audi having sports car family cars, SUVs, electric vehicles, all in a similar design, but yet different enough that at least the connoisseur can differentiate them. Then there's the opposite, dissimilarity. Of course, they want you to stand apart from the competition in the field. And sometimes it's the designer's ambition to do so. In post-war Germany, 90+% of the radios looked like the one on the left. They had boxes, they had this woven carpet loudspeaker grill, and they had some pseudo gold elements and some pseudo ivory buttons. And in comes Dieter Rams and says, well, I want people that listen to music not to have to pretend that this is a piece of furniture. It's a piece of electric equipment, or it was not very electronic at the time. It was still with tubes. Even the SK4 had 5 tubes, I think. And the way how Dieter Rams made a step towards the expectations of the consumers is that he left the left and right side of his SK4 product in wood to have a little bit of a reference to what was there previously. You'll see later models, I think 1 or 2 years later, he made everything in metal and added plastic, and it was all the wood was painted gray to fit the wrapped steel, perforated steel sheet metal in the middle. But here in this initial approach, he still had these wooden sides, but he had perspex, plexiglass on top, hence the name Snow White's Coffin for this product. And several years later, most of the tuner receiver products on the market looked like the Pioneer and the Sony. Braun tried to stick out by having everything matte black, but still they have the plethora of switches. And I've been told they are not even an indication of good electronic quality. If you have these filters, they basically are there to mask some problems in the quality of reception or in the quality of managing the signal. I can't competently speak about it. I'm not an electronics engineer. Yet at the time, Jacob Joensson came and said, okay, we want to do a radio for music lovers. That, what you're doing, those are radios for electronic lovers. You know, I do something completely different. I want it to look as simple as a musical instrument. I'm just, you know, thinking, interpreting what I see in his design. I'm not sure he went through that exact thought process, but surely his design result looks like that. So when you see there's some touch buttons in the front, and red are the ones that you can operate, and white are just indicators. So there's a bass, treble, and balance indicator. And on the left, you adjust the volume, and on the right, the preset stations. Under the metal top, you can flip this open, and you can preset the station. So there's a little bit more to that, but it doesn't look half as complicated, even underneath that lid as the Pioneer, Sony, and Braun device. So he managed to look very different than the rest of the market with the design, and he had a very good reason for that. Okay, so I told you that often clients want you to do something that sticks out on the market, and this is an actual product I'm working on. It's a shampoo bottle for men's grooming product, and the task was to stand out. So I'm not telling you which one I did. I'll let you guess. And you had in the supermarket, they all will be side by side. So it's an actual problem that you need to stick out. You need to be dissimilar. You need to not reference something that is existing by the competition. And well, I think they all look different. So let's say we all managed. Being a lover of iconic design, I'm interested in iconography. What do I mean with that? If you look at this, it's a typical white product. It's a washing machine by the German company Miele. And it looks like most of the, at a distance, most of the other devices in the market. There's good reasons for that. It has to do with production. It has to do with the slot in the bathroom or in the kitchen that German households have that this is supposed to fit in. I know that Americans tend to have, particularly in California, where there's a lot of space, that may not be New York, but in California, where there's a lot of space, you may have a separate room for that. You can't always count on that. So in Germany, this thing will be in the kitchen or in the bathroom. So there's a 60 centimeter wide slot where you can put that in or not. Sometimes it's freestanding. So one exercise I do at times, you know, and I invite you to do too, is to, you know, put some lines on to show the essence of this product. You know, you can still see that that's a washing machine, right? You know, there's the little handle for the soap drawer on the top left. There's a display in the middle because it's a modern washing machine. Because 30 years ago, there was no display. And on the top right, there is this button that gives you probably 5 times more options for programs that you will ever use in your life, which is something I criticize. Then you can make this a little bit thicker. Then you can simplify that more, and you can simplify it yet more. And then you have the image of the archetypical washing machine. And you know, there's a little test here. I put that in the middle of my alphabet that I did for my client. And of course, they don't have a washing machine icon in there. But it just shows you that is the level of abstraction I want you to do when working on a product, just as an exercise to see, so where could that lead you in your design efforts? Here's somebody who obviously has done that with an old Dreyfus foam. I'm not sure this is very successful. I think the earpiece is a little bit too clumsy. And I can assure you, if you ever worked a rotary dial, it's not a nice interface. I mean, I don't even know whether you know how it works. You put your finger in the dial and you turn it around the center up to this little metal bar you see at the bottom right of the dial. And then you let go and it turns back slowly. That's not a problem if you call one person. If you work in a hospital central phone system, like I used to do when I was a civil servant and instead of the military, then, and you have to call 40 people in an hour, then your finger gets sore, believe me. So it's not a good interface. And even arranging the numbers like he did on the circular interface, I don't think is something that people desire. But it's an interesting exercise in iconographic design. Here, another one, the Anglepoise desk lamp. It's George Cardine was a guy, it was a car mechanic who said, I want that a lamp that is flexible but keeps its position that I've put it in, but with the help of these springs that I know from my car mechanic life. And he designed a lamp that's hugely popular and successful. And when many years later, 50 years later, Michele De Lucchi designed a lamp that still today is very popular. It's actually the most sold lamp in the world. He put all the springs inside the aluminum tubes in the lower and the upper part, and only outside you see the steel wires connecting them. But the overall appearance is remarkably similar to the one on the left, because it's iconic. It's so iconic that Pixar uses it as not only as a cartoon figure, but in their logo, you know. So that is iconographic level. This is what I showed you before. Now I showed you examples for each of those things. So that is what could or what should influence the design aesthetically. I will briefly also talk about what should not influence it, you know. And it's sometimes very banal, you know, a product should not lack appeal. It would be undesirable. It would be ugly. And if it's unintelligible, if it's not intuitively usable, that's bad design right there. The same goes for something that's pretentious, that pretends to be better than it actually is. And when you reference, yes, you want a vertical continuity, but it doesn't mean that you want old design. You don't want it to look exactly like a previous product on the market. You don't want it to look dusty. And you don't want to copy it from competitors. Under all circumstances, you want to avoid that. And you don't want it to look like it's something else. If a washing machine looks like a vacuum cleaner, you have a problem. And if you know the term kitsch, showing an example and try to explain that, although that could be an entire lecture on its own. I think Crocs are ugly. I think they're wonderfully comfortable shoes. They're very practical, they're lightweight, and they were designed for boats. And my girlfriend threatened me, we were invited to a boat trip, that I would have to wear those. And, you know, I don't see myself in those, no matter what color. I think they're just ugly. And there's no need for them to be ugly. And I saw some more recent crop type of shoe that was actually really attractive and good looking. The toothbrush holder on the right, let me just say that my nose memory acts up the moment I look at that. I don't want to comment it further, it's just ugly. Here on the left, a product that is perfectly unintelligible. I don't think it is really, it's probably more of a promotional product. I don't know how much the company sells. It's a Swiss Army knife brought to the extreme. Now, if you fold everything in except the knife with the left there, and you want to peel or cut an apple, you'll have such a hard time. Or if you want to use the screwdriver function, just imagine it. Or the saw. I mean, there's really no way how you can possibly use that. And the elevator interface on the right, well, I give them credit points for having Braille lettering. And it looks like the blind people get more information than I do. I can't read Braille. So I don't know what these things do. Something opens and something closes, and probably it's the door, but why I need 4 buttons for that is beyond me. On the left, the Nokia mobile phone. I mean, it's hard not to use expletives here. You have to imagine at the point when Nokia brought it to the market, this product, Apple was working on the first iPhone. And that is the reason why Apple is one of the most valuable companies in the world. And Nokia, who had its heydays then, I'm not sure whether they are closed, bankrupt, the brand has been taken over, or what happened to them. But they're just not anywhere where they used to be, because they really went into the entirely wrong direction by design. The ticket vending machine, it's not a particularly bad one. They are all very bad. I mean, it's a punishment to have to understand what's going on there, which is the worst thing you can say about any product, any interface. It's perfectly unintelligible. I know there are numbers 1, 2, 3. I wouldn't have started at the bottom, okay, but boy, the typography, it's all a mess, you know. I've designed coffee cups, so I can tell you that I wouldn't know where to position my thumb on the Oslo Opera coffee cup, and I wouldn't know how to put any part of my body next to the coffee cup on the right. It's funny, yeah, it looks like a splash, but you really want me to drink from that? I have to wear a dark pullover, that much is sure. If you talk about pretentious design, look at this. I know Philip Stark is a great designer. I've used one of his chairs as an example for excellent, outstanding design. I really love his work. And this is a perfectly stupid product on many levels. It's gold, but it's of course not. It's a gun, which of course doesn't shoot. And it's there to decry the violence of war. No, come on, it doesn't do that either. It's an expensive lamp from Floss. And I don't know who needs that in his living room, but I pity those people already. And if we talk about old design, this is still going on. You can still buy remote controls that look like that. They should be forbidden. Who needs that many buttons? I want to know statistics. How many of these buttons are actually ever used on average? I think probably 3 or maybe half a dozen. But there are, what, 40, 50 on them? That's just unforgivable. As well as these copy designs. The Flexi dog leash is an interesting product. I've worked with this company, and there's a guy who invented the retractable dog leash, which is a practical thing. And then another guy bought this idea, it's patented, and developed it into a marketable product, which is no small feat. And then a Chinese company copied it, and you see the one on the right. But what's worse, there are copies that are indistinguishable. They told me that they got complaints that their product would break, and so they said, "Can you please ship it to us? We'll look into that." And the chief engineer had to look for hours until he found out that the plastic parts didn't have the same markings inside hidden that their own had, so he could tell that it was a copy. And you know what these copiers do? They never copy everything in the quality. What they want to copy is a financial success. They don't want to copy the effort that goes into manufacturing. So if you take a spring that is not stainless steel, and then your dog goes out in the rain, and the spring starts to rust and then starts to break, you're not using this as long as it's intended to. I mean, a dog leash, you walk a dog twice a day at least. So if it's good for 1,000 functions, that's not even 2 years, you know. So you need to really make a product that is solid for that kind of application. And the copiers never do. And that's what makes them bad. Plus, the companies that did the original, they lose the profit, which they would love to share with the designer, I'm sure. I'm just throwing this out here as an idea. And then there are these malapropisms, like this golf club that moonlights as a drink dispenser. I don't know, are we adults here? Who needs to hide that he's drinking while playing golf? I don't know anybody, so I think is a very silly product. And the last one is this example for kitsch. My girlfriend, who's my muse and a reference for many things, she likes it. And I said, come on, I give this product points for being identifiable. I don't expect tomato ketchup or water coming out of this. So I know it's going to be milk. But the milk doesn't come out of the mouth of a cow. And the cow is not made of porcelain. So it's kitsch. It's really kitsch. And I don't like it. And thank God we don't have it in our household. But I think I better check on a regular basis. That is all for today. I want to do a little summary at the end to wrap it up for you, concise statements. So there are infinite pre-existing visual representations of all aspects a product can have. There are no limits to what people have in their minds of what a product could or should look like. And you as a designer, you need to know them. That's of course impossible. So you need to know as many as possible because you're working for many people. You have to know what people are used to expect when they expect a washing machine or a radio or a snow boot or whatever. And you have to be able to reinterpret images. You have to be able to find a new balance of these clues, to combine them in an innovative way, like Philip Stark did with his plastic chair. You know, you take the imagery, but you change the manufacturing, you change the material, you change the look by making it translucent. That's one of the reasons why I bought the chair. It doesn't clutter the room. So my advice is, number one, don't be lazy. Please make an effort when you design, go through the motions and find lots of different ideas. And don't be too literal, you know? Don't take the first thing that comes along and say, well, yeah, it should be more expensive. So you mean gold, yeah? You mean diamonds. That's one interpretation of representing value. It's not the only one. It could be the precision, the finesse of the texture. It could be how well the details are positioned on a surface, like the screws are not scattered all over the back, but the back design is also nice. That shows me more than a gold plating would do, that the designer and the people manufacturing this product have taken care. So you have to be innovative in every approach, not only create an innovative function in the product, but an innovative appearance, an innovative design. And a good idea for that is to understand and develop metaphors, visual representations of actually existing features, properties, or situations. And to get there, you have to ask questions. Now you're students, you can ask professors, you can ask me, but when you are in a design office, you ask your colleagues, you ask the users of the products, you ask yourself. And that's the thought I want to leave you with. So thank you very much for your attention.